Well, appreciate everyone staying so late. I know typically at these types of events, people are usually emptying out post-lunch, so it's really nice that everyone's able to stay. But question for the audience, how strict is Church and Dwight security? Babs just arrived, he parked right in front of the front door. Is this something he should be worried about?
No, I'm good. I'm parked in the back.
Awesome. Well, I'm Jason Smith. I lead the brand solution sales team for TeamSnap, and it's been really, really awesome getting to see a lot of different people here who are users of the app themselves. But today, get the opportunity to chat with Babs. And Babs, your background is beyond impressive. Unilever, IBM, Viacom, but really want to kind of start going back to 2008 when you were leading the digital transformation of Unilever. And we heard from a bunch of different marketers about how they're approaching today's environment, but you sat through digital transformation for a company right as the last recession took place. What were some of the biggest lessons that you really took away from that you would want to be able to relay to a bunch of different brand marketers here, really trying to navigate a landscape that they haven't really been accustomed to for a long time?
Yeah, so hello everyone. Nice to see you all. I would say that there's the kind of the blocking and tackling, which is appoint someone to be a lead, have a clear vision and a strategy that includes key pillars, all that. But I think some of the things that really helped in actually driving transformation forward were more kind of subtle. So one thing I always talk about is this idea of living this space yourself. We talked a lot about training and skill sets and all this, but I think the key, and that was during Web 2, which was really around social media and mobile, was to ensure that especially the executives at the company, lived this space themselves, got on Twitter, got on Facebook, whatever, had an account. I used to say the idea that you try to create a television ad, having never seen television, would obviously be a challenge. So, so that was one of the things that was really big, and we held a few big sessions all the way, from Paul Pullman on down, and got them all on all the key social media and the key devices. We gave away iPads to everyone. Actually, there's an old Indian proverb I used to use that my dad used to say, which is, if you want to see heaven, you have to die first. Right? You have to experience it to get to the promised land. So I used to say that, and there were a lot of Indians there, so that was good. I was in a global role in London. So that was one thing. I think the other key thing is, once you kind of set this burning platform, like things are happening, this is going to drive change in all sorts of ways in your business. It's to put in place enablers to be able to institutionalize it across the marketing organization, because just saying and talking about, let's do these things is difficult when there's entire processes in place that have been around for 40, 50 years, whatever. And so as a central team, what we really did was ensure that we had enablers in place, things like a training program that 4,000 out of our 6,000 marketers went through, like a rigorous 52-week training program. We set a advisory board so we could hear from people who were experts in the space. We formed big partnerships, so-called standing on the shoulders of giants, right? In those days, it might have been Facebook and Twitter. Today, it might be, Watson or ChatGPT, OpenAI, like different kind of companies that are in the lead in today's space, because they're the experts, right? They can help you, and you can share with them kind of how you operate, and together is how you kind of get solutions. So enablers were key. The other thing that I would push very hard, especially for a marketing organization that isn't as used to being out and about kind of selling, is this idea of executive presence, to be able to really drive influence across your team, your organization, your leadership, and to be able to kind of really develop those influential skills. So we did some of that. And then, measuring. I think it's very, Paul Pullman used to say, you can't treasure what you can't measure, right? So if you don't know what the hell you're doing, you don't really succeed or failing. It's tough. So really put in place the parameters, the KPIs, and really follow those and make sure you're tracking those on a regular basis. And that doesn't just mean measure business results; it literally measuring the proxy stuff. How many people went through the training programs? Have we how much have we saved in the partnerships? What have we done? There's like a whole slew of different metrics we got. How many followers we got, like for the brands, different things like that. But lastly, I would say it's to, marketers are supposed to be creative and have great imaginations. And one thing that I really pushed was this idea of reframing the business and reframing how you think about the technology. And one example I used to always give is because basically the internet was there, and then but people were just running ads in the same way that they did before. So banners were basically print ads on the web, and but wasn't taking advantage of all the key abilities, the interactivity, the targeting that you could get from this new technology. Just like now, there's going to be a ton of new opportunities with AI and blockchain and different things that if you don't reframe how you think about those, you'll just do the same things, and it'll take a long time before you're really leveraging the possibilities, right? So it's a great story that I used to tell way back in the 20s when radio was a new technology, right? Everyone had newspapers back then. We get like 3 newspapers a day. Morning Gazette, Saturday Evening Post, whatever. And when radio first started, there was a guy that worked there, which is very key. This is like great learning, this particular case, so really take this in. This guy named David Sarnoff. He worked for the biggest radio manufacturer of its time, RCA. And he had this big idea to run the heavyweight fight on the radio. And the management was like, it's a stupid idea. Like, radio's for news. And he's like, well, no, newspapers were for news, but radio has the ability to hear things live. And the fight at that time, that's the biggest thing there is, like the Super Bowl of its day. And he's like, if we broadcast the fight on the radio, like that would get people. No one but was buying radios at the time. It was this big, giant, ugly, brown thing. It cost a fortune, and all it did was broadcast news all day. And so, anyway, fast forward, he finally got management to agree, and these again are key lessons. But they said, we won't fund it. You can fund it within your budget, great, which is very typical, especially with a big CPG company. Okay, you can pilot, test, experience, whatever, but no incremental spending, just figure out how to do it. And they figured he'd never do it, so they're like, okay, nothing to bother here. So this guy goes out, he hires one broadcaster within his budget, and he broadcasts the heavyweight fight, and it changed the face of radio until television 30 years later, right? Huge fight. It turns out everyone that night, to the few people that had radios, went to their house, and radio sales, like literally hockey stick rise after that. And then radio became a thing for content, music, Procter and Unilever developed soap operas made for radio, and events and all this stuff. So the radio became much more than news. And then, of course, every new technology has more and more capabilities. So what you need to do as a marketer, and especially coming from, these all marketers, especially coming from the marketing organization, is within a larger company, you're the ones that are supposed to reframe and imagine and think about ways to bring these technologies to life to hit your consumers and all that. So I would think that was, and a lot of people really took it hard and started thinking about like different ideas, and we did some great things with Axe, with real great insights, and then understanding how to reframe. Like we created a wake-up alarm clock for teens at that time when people didn't know that necessarily mobile phones were essentially alarm clocks. I think you've all probably heard of some of the stuff we did with Dove online, and leveraging interactivity, and the campaign for Real Beauty, which really exploded both the business and the brand at that time, and to this day is still going. A lot of that was built off of the new technology that came. So there was a lot of stuff, but I would say those are some of the more nuanced things.
Got it. And you're working with CMOs across the space right now, and you talked about measuring being key. You also talked about reframing the brand. In today's environment, things are happening quicker than the snap of a finger.
Yeah.
What are these different CMOs telling you about making sure they're at least giving enough time to measure the different tactics that they're going out and having their team execute on? Knowing that things are changing on a dime, but you still want to make sure that you're giving enough time for something to actually take place in the space.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things with that. The fact that things are changing as rapidly and dramatically as they are, I think the first thing I would think about is the way you as an employee, or the types of employees that you bring in. When I came up to the business, the most important thing was your IQ. Like, how much knowledge do you have? Where do you go to school and all that? And then over the years, it was obvious that EQ became much more important, and the combination was whatever. Today, we really look at things called CQ, right? Your curiosity quotient. You've got your knowledge, you've got your social skills, but you really need to be curious in a way that allows you to know what's going on more regularly with your consumers, with technology, with data, with all the stuff that's happening. It's happening faster and faster and faster, and the people who have set knowledge are great, but that becomes old in a hurry, right? You have to be able to have that kind of mentality and the philosophy of being able to always learn and be curious about what's happening, because things are going so quick. So that's the first thing. I think the other thing is the CMO role itself, or the marketer role, is changing dramatically and has been for some time. You're seeing a lot of, actually some companies are eliminating the CMO role, or they're changing it in many ways, because what used to be essentially an extension of brand management, when I first came up in the business, when the CMO was essentially invented, is now a combination of, you'll see CXOs and chief growth and CCO. There's all these different things that says, it looks like you're eliminating the CMO, but what you're really doing is saying the core basic marketing skills that have been the most important for the lead marketer isn't necessarily the most important or the only thing. So you've got to be able to really understand data, technology, customer experiences, all the different aspects of communication. The role now incorporates all that. So I think the role itself has to, if we're going to continue with like marketing, especially for CPG companies where typically marketing is the driving function within an organization like this, and it becomes really more critical. Remember that people understand that marketing is more than the 4 Ps or whatever used to be made up of a marketing organization. And then the measurement is really around, if you think about some of the biggest concerns of CMOs or businesses in general, one of them is this, post cookie deprecation IDFA, where you're not going to be able to target like you once did. So a lot of companies, and CPG companies historically were terrible at this, was capturing and harnessing first-party data, because frankly we didn't need to. We had the middlemen with the, through the retailers, but that's becoming very important now, and will become more and more important, especially as AI continues to explode. So, that's really, if you can, I don't know how involved you are with this, but the importance of a MarTech stack and being able to implement that in a way that ties your pipes together, your brands together, and gives you kind of the universal version of the truth, that's the way to measure. Otherwise, you're just kind of, you're operating pretty blindly, which was fine for many years for brands that were mostly about building their brands, and we had MMM in place and all the things that we could kind of help us with our attributes and things like that. But today, I think it becomes more crucial than ever, because first of all, if you look at what's happening to linear television, that's not going to be a place that you can, in the long haul, continue to count on for driving your brand and driving your business. So I think those are some of the things. The other things, we talked about talent, and that's the other big thing on everybody's mind is between the remote and hybrid workforce and this idea of a liquid workforce where, a lot of companies are starting to operate with a model of, if we don't have the expertise and all the things we need, let's have a central group of full-time employees and bring on all these different kinds of people, which is what, when I was at IBM, we did this whole study on the future of work, where the idea was really by 2030, the workforce itself would be much more of this liquid workforce, which is actually great if you think about it for both employees and employers, because for big companies, you don't have to pay all these salaries to get the best people. You could have fractional people who are great, and you might need them for a piece of them, and then have to pay benefits and full salaries and all that. And then for employees, it's great, because one of the things, the only way to generate real wealth is to be able to have multiple, revenue streams coming in, right? So you can have your salary, even if it's $300,000-$400,000 a year. That's not the same as having 4 or 5 different jobs where you're getting paid, by all of them, which is kind of what this gig economy and this liquid workforce is meant to be through all our studies. When I was in management consulting, that was kind of the look of the future.
Interesting. So you're talking a little bit about the future of the workforce, what IBM was predicting was going to come in 2030. Well, let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now. AI, ChatGPT, topics du jour that you're kind of hearing talked about, maybe not fully understood by everyone in the space. You're talking to CMOs and different types of executives all across the board in different industries. How are they looking at it from a high level of it really impacting both their businesses as well as their workforce?
Well, so we're all, constantly bombarded with the concept of Web3 and this generative AI, blockchain, and XR, which is AR and VR, right? So, and then there's like different spikes on what's hot and what's not at the moment. Like for a while, the metaverse was all anyone talked about, and then that went nowhere. But then meanwhile, yesterday, Apple launches, the new product, which is, it's gonna be really funny to see Tim Cook get into the metaverse before it's up and rename his whole company, because that's what's gonna happen, right? Once Apple creates something, even though it's $3,500, it'll probably take some time, but that will have a much better chance of kicking off this concept of the metaverse. So that will be very important. No question, it's only a question of when, and preparing for that is key with, pilots and testing and MVPs and all the things that you need to do to be able to set yourself up for success when it is mainstream, so it doesn't just kind of hit you like a ton of bricks. And I think the same thing goes for artificial intelligence, which isn't anything really new. Again, when I was at IBM, we created a slew of different kind of marketing programs leveraging Watson, but it was like we were operating in a vacuum because maybe the technology was too early for the mainstream and even for the industry at large. But now it's obvious what the possibilities are. But I think the idea that it's not a creative possibility is off. I mean, one of the things we did when I was at IBM was for like Wimbledon and the U.S. Open, for that matter. We created sizzle reels using Watson. So if you're so one cool thing, one way to understand AI at its most basic level, which is a great way I used to remember, was always to think of the acronym URL, which is the same as for any website, and so it understands, it reasons, and it learns, and the I's, it interacts. That's all AI is, and that's extraordinary as a technology goes, because no other technology till now, especially the reasoning part, was capable of such things. So in this case, what we did was, so basically it can take in video as well as images and all that. So when a tennis player went like this, it predicted highlights based on different movements and different when the crowd clapped. Like it knew the highlights, so it would make a quick sizzle reel because in tennis, right, there's all these different all these matches going on at the same time, so you can't watch them all. And it would capture all the highlights from all of that and create a sizzle reel and send it up to CBS. And then what normally took hours and hours to edit before they sent to ESPN all the news would just be much quicker because most of it's done. Of course, it'll make some mistakes and won't get things exactly right, and then the editing process is an hour or two versus days. But that changes the whole concept of creative as it relates to video. So that's one thing. I mean, we did. I loved what at Cannes one year we used Watson we invited 100 marketers to the party, and we used Watson to scrape all their social media feeds and everything else, and we had prepared for them their favorite drink as soon as they walked in with the invite, because we had already if they even one time had shown a glass of wine, whatever they did in social media, that was a drink we got them. And sometimes people were little because sometimes they were really specific drinks because they might have written it out. People were freaking out a little. But that's the capability, and I think the most important one while I was there was we did this thing where in medicine. I don't know if any of you ever went to the actual Watson Experience Lab, but this is the case they typically show there. There was this kid who was really sick, and no one could figure out what was wrong with him. By the Cleveland Clinic, all these different top hospitals and Sloan Kettering couldn't figure out what's wrong with this poor kid. And they ran it through Watson, because at the time Watson was partnered with the Cleveland Clinic. And Watson read every New England Journal of Medicine ever written in 10 minutes, combined that with all the notes, including handwritten by doctors, and all the scripts and everything that doctors did during all their visits, brought all that data together, and with a 96% rate of accuracy, said this kid had this disease. It was called Kawasaki syndrome or something. He had been to Singapore, I guess, one time, months ago, and it was right. And the kid, it's really very easy to cure that, and within 6 weeks the kid was fine with antibiotics or whatever. But it's just because they were able to identify it. And the one thing was the kid's eyes were bloodshot, which normally would mean nothing. They're just well, he's sick, of course it's bloodshot. It's red, whatever, he's tired. But in combination with all the other things, it amounted to all the symptoms of this particular disease. And only with, the thing that AI provides is scale, right? It can read all that and do all that and bring all that together in a way that no human, even the best doctor in the world, it's gonna be tough to get all that. So, so all of that is incredible, incredible technology. And one of the things I did do when I was there was I tried to create a blockchain for the ad world, for media buying especially, because in the old days, media had 3 players, and it was very simple in advertising. You got the agent, the brand, the agency, the supplier. Typically in the old days, the agency got 15% commission, all the rest of the money went to the publisher. It's kind of easy to track it, right? Today, there's 10 to 15 middle players with ad tech and marketing, all this stuff, and they're all taking 20 cents, 30 cents on the dollar. And so trying to create a blockchain to establish provenance and then to establish clarity on where that money was going and all that. So we did an MVP with that, and a bunch of brands participated. So I think things like that will help you prepare, because you don't want to go all in and do some huge crazy thing, and if it's a flop, it genuinely hurts your business badly. You want to go in, understand that there's incredible power in these new technologies, and then reframe it for your own business and how it might, if you think about your insights in your business and how it might help, and then take a shot, right? Do a pilot, do something. It won't break, especially companies your size, business this big. You'll never. That money will be, not kind of totally unimportant in 5 years. But the learning you get from that could be great. So I think it's important to stay on it, to do design thinking, to establish ways of working around these new technologies, but also use that imagination, your marketers. That's the thing the company, I think, expects from you all more than anyone else.
Awesome. And I guess last thing here, knowing that we're right up against the 5 o'clock hour, you're talking about AI.
Don't want to interrupt happy hour.
You have some pretty awesome stories you're talking about that you've been able to come up and see. It's a bunch of different brand marketers that are in here right now. Put yourself in their shoes. How are you leveraging AI, different technologies that are out there right now to potentially impact the laundry brand that someone might be working on? Could be the cleaning product that might be there.
I think if I were doing that right now, I think the best way would be to think about not AI as a new kind of technology, but as a plug-in to everything that you're doing already. So, what we used to call systems integration, when you had a bunch of technology products that talk to each other, whatever. I think the way to really take advantage, especially of generative AI, is to be able to use an API and put that into whatever your MarTech system is, whatever data systems you have currently, because that's the way to really capitalize it. I mean, one way, we had a great thing that we did, maybe something so basic. So right now, I don't know how you have like internal share drives, and you probably have a bunch of brands that do similar stuff that aren't talking to each other, and the left hand's not talking to the right. One thing that could be really valuable is to set up a very easy AI API where anybody, let's say you're Arm & Hammer and you're looking to do something other, maybe in AI, or in using new technology, and maybe two or three other brands in the company have already done something, you don't know it, and to be able to easily pull that, all the files from the company, confidential, whatever it's within the company, and AI can, grab it like that in a way that currently you'd have to call 10 people, figure out, maybe use a central team, maybe never get it. I mean, I can't tell you, Unilever, we have so many brands, we did, especially globally, we did so many amazing things individually that it was almost a waste that we didn't use that learning to help other brands, because we're not competing with each other, right? It makes, when you're in a category, you feel like you're competing with each other, but in the end of the day, you're not the company you want it to grow and the stock price to go up and all that. So I think that's a simple thing that I would institute. I would definitely try to use it for things like this concept of getting the universal version of the truth, getting your data in a way that you really know, your sales, what's driving it, what's working, what's not, but putting it in a dashboard, in a system that allows you to really, have this picture visually of what's going on, that could help you with your decision-making process. And then I would pilot, again, thinking about your own brand. I mean, no one knows your brand like you as the brand steward, and thinking about, just, again, looking the same way that Sarnoff did, looking at it and thinking, wow, what could, first of all, learn about the technologies themselves so you understand, like, what it is capable of doing, and then try to think about, like, what problem could I solve using this in a way that I can't today, and then, put together a workshop and, again, stand on the shoulder of giants, bring in the people that are experts on the other side, and talk to one another, and you'll probably come up with some solutions that you'll be able to pilot, and you only need, like, one or two to really take off, and gives yourself a huge competitive advantage in places that others may not be doing that. And then the other thing that I think is as you move forward, and people are worried about AI taking your job and taking different things, I think really start honing your skills in places that are above and beyond what AI will be able to do, right? Executive presence, leadership, CQ, like all these skills that are much more about, and imagination especially, they're kind of above the fray, right? Where, hey, then you can use AI to bring to life what you want it to, but you have the skills to, institutionalize that, to spread that, to do whatever you need to lead a group of people and really help yourself build your business and your brand.
Awesome. Well, I very much appreciate the chat. Any questions from the audience before letting everyone get out of here? Cool.
All
Thanks,
right.
Babsy.
Thank you so much.